Caitlin Clark did not simply arrive in the WNBA, she completely shifted the league's spotlight. Television ratings exploded, arenas sold out across the country, and long-standing records were broken at a pace few expected. But with her rapid rise came a different kind of attention. It was not just criticism or competitive pressure. It became a conversation about the intense physical treatment she was receiving on the court. Hard fouls, aggressive contact, and controversial moments quickly became part of the national discussion, especially during heated matchups involving players like Marina Mabrey, where routine plays suddenly turned into viral flashpoints. As fans debated, players responded, and the media pushed different narratives, one question continued to grow louder. Was this simply the normal physical nature of professional basketball, or was the league struggling to protect the player who had transformed it almost overnight? Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA carrying more hype than any prospect in women's basketball history. Her impact at Iowa had already become a cultural phenomenon. She shattered the all-time NCAA scoring record across both men's and women's basketball, surpassing Pete Maravich's legendary mark that had stood for decades. Arenas that had rarely seen sellout crowds suddenly packed every seat when she played, while NCAA tournament ratings featuring Iowa regularly outperformed many NBA regular season broadcasts. Even before making her professional debut, Clark had already become one of the biggest stars in sports, highlighted by a massive Nike endorsement deal reportedly worth millions. The expectations surrounding her WNBA arrival were unlike anything the league had experienced before, bringing a level of pressure that has overwhelmed countless talented athletes in the past. Her transition into the professional game was not flawless. During the opening stretch of her rookie season, Clark struggled with efficiency while adjusting to defenders who were faster, stronger, and far more physical than what she faced in college. She forced difficult passes, committed uncharacteristic turnovers, and experienced the reality every elite college player eventually encounters when stepping into the professional ranks. Defenses had spent months studying her tendencies, building game plans specifically designed to take away her greatest strengths. Yet the adjustment period did not last long. By the middle of the season, the early criticism had almost completely disappeared as Clark evolved into one of the league's most productive players. Her rookie numbers quickly became historic. She averaged elite scoring, playmaking, rebounding, and defensive production while breaking the WNBA's all-time single-season assist record. She also recorded multiple triple-doubles, becoming the first rookie in league history to accomplish the feat. Clark earned unanimous Rookie of the Year honors and helped lead the Indiana Fever back into playoff contention, reigniting excitement around the franchise and the league itself. Attendance, merchandise sales, and television viewership all confirmed the same reality. Caitlin Clark was not simply a popular rookie. She was a transformational superstar whose influence stretched far beyond basketball. At the same time, the physical treatment directed toward her became impossible to ignore. As Clark improved throughout the season, the aggressive contact she faced did not decrease. If anything, it intensified. Statistics showed she absorbed an unusually high percentage of the league's flagrant fouls, creating debates across sports media about whether the league was doing enough to protect its most valuable rising star. Much of the attention focused on games against the Chicago Sky, where several controversial fouls involving Clark sparked heated reactions online and on television. The pattern became such a major storyline that it eventually grew into a national conversation extending far beyond basketball fans. Many analysts compared the situation to the treatment Michael Jordan received from the Detroit Pistons during the late 1980s. The infamous Jordan rules were specifically designed to physically wear down the NBA's brightest star through constant contact and relentless defensive pressure. LeBron James and Stephen Curry have also dealt with similar tactics throughout their careers. Physical targeting of superstar players is nothing new in professional sports. What made Clark's situation feel different to many observers was the sheer concentration of incidents surrounding one player and the non-stop public attention attached to every moment. Several controversial plays only intensified the debate. One of the most discussed incidents occurred during a game against the Connecticut Sun, when Dejounte Carrington accidentally struck Clark near the eye during a defensive sequence, leaving her with a visible black eye. Replays spread across social media within minutes, leading to endless arguments over whether the contact was intentional or simply part of a fast, physical basketball play. The moment became another example of how every interaction involving Caitlin Clark had turned into a national headline, further fueling the ongoing debate about competition, physicality, and the league's responsibility to protect its biggest star. The debate surrounding the incident only became more intense afterward. Some viewers believed the contact with Caitlin Clark's eye was simply an accidental part of a fast defensive play, while others argued it looked far more deliberate. Dejanai Carrington addressed the situation after the game and firmly denied any harmful intent. She explained that she did not even realize she had struck Clark during the sequence and questioned why she would intentionally target another player's eye. Clark herself handled the moment calmly during her post-game comments. Rather than escalating the controversy, she described the play as accidental, called it part of basketball, and made it clear she had already moved on. Despite suffering a visible black eye, she stayed in the game and avoided turning the incident into a personal feud. The internet, however, refused to move on so quickly. Clips of the play spread across social media almost instantly, and the image of Clark's black eye quickly became symbolic for fans who believed she had been absorbing excessive physical punishment throughout the season. To many supporters, the incident was no longer viewed as isolated contact within a competitive sport. Instead, it reinforced the growing belief that Clark was being specifically targeted by opponents. Reactions became emotional, passionate, and deeply divided. Some fans demanded suspensions, harsher officiating, and stronger league protections for star players. Others pushed back, arguing that professional basketball has always been physical and that Clark should not receive special treatment simply because of her popularity. Another major figure in the debate was Marina Mabrey, a player known throughout the league for her aggressive style and competitive intensity. Her matchups against Clark consistently drew attention because of the physical tone they carried. Several possessions between the two players became heavily discussed online, with critics arguing that some of the contact crossed the line of legitimate defense. Supporters of Mabrey countered by saying she competed the same way against everyone and that the extra attention only existed because every interaction involving Clark was being magnified under a national spotlight. As with most controversies in sports, the truth likely existed somewhere in the middle. The WNBA has always been an intensely physical league filled with elite athletes willing to compete through hard contact and relentless pressure. Not every tough foul is malicious, and not every collision represents targeting. Officials are forced to make split-second decisions in high-pressure moments, and mistakes are inevitable in every professional sport. Yet the repeated concentration of physical incidents involving one specific player created a narrative that became difficult for fans and analysts to ignore. Whether intentional or not, something about the season felt different, and the debate over how the league should respond slowly evolved into one of the defining storylines of the year. Then the conversation shifted again in an unexpected way. Several of the players who had been criticized for their physical play against Clark eventually found themselves on the receiving end of hard fouls as well, leading social media to label the moments as karma. During a game between the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx, Marina Mabrey absorbed a heavy hit that left her visibly shaken and clutching her face in pain. Videos of the moment immediately circulated online, with many fans celebrating it as payback for the physical treatment Clark had endured earlier in the season. The reaction revealed just how emotionally invested parts of the fan base had become in the ongoing controversy. Dejanai Carrington experienced a similar moment during another heated matchup when a hard play left her stunned on the floor while teammates rushed in to prevent the situation from escalating further. For players accustomed to delivering physical defense themselves, suddenly becoming the one absorbing punishment created a dramatic shift in perspective. Online reactions once again framed the incidents as justice or balance finally being restored. For many frustrated fans, it felt like consequences catching up to players they believed had crossed the line against Clark throughout the year. Yet the so-called karma narrative also exposed a darker side of modern sports culture. While some supporters viewed those moments as satisfying, celebrating injuries or pain crossed an uncomfortable line. Following the eye poke controversy, Carrington reportedly received waves of online abuse and even death threats from extreme fans. Marina Mabrey also faced relentless harassment that extended far beyond criticism of her basketball style. Those reactions did not represent the majority of Clark's supporters, but they demonstrated how quickly passionate fandom can become toxic when fueled by non-stop social media outrage. Throughout all of it, Caitlin Clark consistently refused to encourage the hostility surrounding the situation. She never publicly celebrated opponents getting hurt, never demanded revenge, and never attempted to turn the incidents into personal attacks against other players. After the eye poke controversy, she could have easily intensified the outrage by questioning Carrington's intentions or criticizing the officiating. Instead, she remained composed, described the play as accidental, complimented her opponent's performance, and redirected attention back toward basketball itself. Her response helped prevent the situation from turning into an even larger feud between players. Unfortunately, many fans ignored the example she set. The anger Clark chose not to express publicly was amplified online by others who directed personal attacks toward Carrington and Mabrey in ways that had little to do with basketball anymore. This became one of the most uncomfortable aspects of the entire discussion because it revealed how quickly sports debates can evolve into personal hostility. The individuals sending threats or celebrating injuries were not defending the integrity of the game. They were turning athletes into villains and using controversy as justification for abusive behavior. The controversy surrounding Caitlin Clark only intensified as more moments throughout the season went viral online. Although Dejanay Carrington continued to insist the eye poke was accidental and Clark herself dismissed it afterward as simply part of basketball, the internet interpreted the replay very differently. Slow-motion clips circulated endlessly across social media, stripping away the speed and context of the live play until the impact itself became the entire focus. Fair or not, that single moment evolved into a symbol of the broader debate over how much physical contact opponents were being allowed to use against Clark without serious consequences. As the season progressed, additional incidents continued feeding the narrative. A hard foul during a matchup against the Chicago Sky drew widespread attention after Clark was knocked off balance attacking the basket, resulting in a flagrant 1 call after video review. Games against Chicago already carried heightened emotional intensity because of the growing rivalry surrounding Clark and the Fever, so every physical sequence immediately exploded into online debate. Another game against the Los Angeles Sparks sparked similar discussion when repeated perimeter contact against Clark led broadcasters and analysts to openly question whether rookie superstars were being officiated the same way as established veterans. What made the entire conversation so volatile was not just the physicality itself, but the interpretation attached to it afterward. Clark supporters argued there was a clear pattern of excessive contact that went beyond normal rookie treatment. They pointed to the frequency of hard fouls, the number of controversial moments going viral within such a short period, and what they believed were inconsistent officiating standards compared to other stars in the league. On the opposite side, former players and analysts pushed back strongly against those claims. They argued that elite ball-dominant guards naturally absorb more contact because of how often they control possessions, attack defenses, and force opponents into difficult situations. Clark's style of play, with deep shooting range, constant drives into traffic, and heavy offensive responsibility, naturally placed her in positions where physical contact was unavoidable. From that perspective, the issue was not targeted aggression but simply the structural reality of high-level professional basketball. The WNBA itself attempted to calm the growing controversy by publicly reviewing several incidents while league leadership maintained that officiating standards remained consistent across the board. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert defended the integrity of officiating crews and emphasized that the league continued evaluating plays carefully. Yet those statements failed to fully quiet the criticism, especially as social media transformed every borderline foul or missed whistle into another national debate within minutes. Even media voices that initially dismissed concerns surrounding Clark's treatment gradually began acknowledging the growing perception problem. Commentators like Stephen A. Smith eventually admitted that the accumulation of controversial incidents had created a narrative the league could no longer simply ignore. At that point, the issue had evolved beyond individual fouls or isolated games. It became a broader discussion about transparency, consistency, and how a rapidly expanding league handles unprecedented levels of visibility and scrutiny. Every possession involving Clark was now replayed, analyzed, and debated in real time by millions of viewers, placing enormous pressure not only on players but also on officials and league leadership. The larger debate ultimately centered on the future identity of the WNBA itself. Every professional sports league eventually faces the same challenge, balancing competitive intensity with the responsibility to protect the star players who drive growth and attention. Protect stars too aggressively, and critics argue the game becomes unfair. Fail to protect them enough, and the league risks damaging the athletes whose presence fuels revenue, ratings, and long-term popularity. The NBA confronted this same dilemma decades earlier during the era of the Detroit Pistons and New York Knicks, when excessive physicality threatened to overshadow skill and entertainment. In response, the league gradually implemented rule adjustments, stricter flagrant foul enforcement, and officiating changes designed to protect offensive players and increase scoring opportunities. That shift helped create the global popularity explosion of the Michael Jordan era and later benefited stars like LeBron James and Stephen Curry. Many observers now believe the WNBA is standing at a similar crossroads. Caitlin Clark has generated a level of attention, revenue, and cultural relevance the league has spent years attempting to achieve. She has become the centerpiece of rising television ratings, increased ticket demand, growing merchandise sales, and expanding mainstream interest in women's basketball. Young fans who had never followed the WNBA before are suddenly planning weekends around Indiana Fever games because of her presence. The central question facing the league is whether it is willing to protect that level of importance with stronger institutional action rather than public reassurance alone. Critics argue the officiating standards surrounding Clark have not appeared fully consistent compared to other stars, while the lack of a highly visible league response has allowed frustration and speculation to grow unchecked. In that vacuum, fans filled the conversation with outrage, the media filled it with non-stop debate, and social media amplified the most toxic reactions from every side. The result became damaging not only for individual players but for the league's overall image. Through all of it, Clark herself continued handling the spotlight with remarkable composure. After a physically and emotionally exhausting rookie season, she stepped away from basketball for a period of rest and recovery, traveling through Europe instead of participating in off-season tournaments or overseas competition. The decision reflected both maturity and the intense pressure she had endured throughout the year. For a young athlete who had spent nearly her entire life consumed by basketball, choosing distance from the game suggested just how overwhelming her first professional season had become emotionally as well as physically. Still, anticipation for her return only continued growing.